Good morning, everyone. I'm Jennifer Slattery with the League of Cities and Towns. I'm Director of Training and Membership Services, and welcome to our Workshop Wednesday program for today. It's a special one where we have some special guests. So we've got Jordan Day and Ernie Almonte here from the League with me, and I just asked Ernie if he could speak on behalf of the League and introduce us. Thanks.
Okay, well, thank you, Jen, and thank you for putting this together. And thank you for everyone that's on this call. It's, as you all know, this is very important for us, for the municipalities, to gain knowledge on how we can leverage the information that we get from the federal government and implement it at the municipal level. We always like to say we're trying to be very innovative at the local level, and part of what we need is we need to be educated on what the new trends are, what the new grants are, what new initiatives need to take place, and also to help us to connect the dots and to execute a plan moving forward. So this is a great opportunity for all of us to learn and develop plans and to move forward. So thank you for putting this all together, and thank you for attending. So back to you, Jen.
Okay, great. So I just want to make sure we've got contact with Senator Reid. Did we lose him? There's so many boxes. Let's see here. There we go. Good morning, Senator. Thank you for being here today.
Well, good morning, and I'm delighted to be here today. Honored. It's great to see so many smiling faces. I'd like to thank Ernie Almonte and his team for letting me join this Workshop Wednesday session and for letting me bring along some special guests. They can help ensure you get the most out of the new federal incentives under the Inflation Reduction Act. You are all leaders when it comes to climate action, and you know how vital it is to help people and businesses lower their energy costs. That requires federal investment, coordination, and collaboration at every level of government. The good news is Congress passed the Inflation Reduction Act to provide about $370 billion for climate solutions and to help lower clean energy costs. This is the largest investment in climate action ever made by the United States. It puts our nation on a path to cut carbon emissions by an estimated 40% by 2030. It includes a host of clean energy incentives, credits, rebates, and competitive grants. It will help consumers and communities lower energy costs, create new opportunities for businesses and workers, and power our economy forward. The question is, how do you and your constituents take full advantage of the law and maximize its benefits? Well, I'm pleased to have Carolyn Burnt from the National League of Cities and Noah Goldman from Rewiring America go over key incentives in detail. They will offer an overview of how municipalities can utilize this new law and answer any questions you may have. We also have Chris Currens from the Rhode Island Office of Energy Resources with us today. Many of you know Chris, and we are grateful to have his expertise as well. In addition to today's panel, I just launched a special section of my website, read.senate.gov/IRA. It is a one-stop shop for Inflation Reduction Act resources and helpful links. And if you or your team needs additional help, please don't hesitate to contact my office. We all saw the recent impacts the Canadian wildfires had on Rhode Island and other states up and down the East Coast. It was a stark reminder of the urgent need to address climate change. Scientists warn that these types of severe weather events will only continue to worsen and become more frequent unless we take real coordinated action. People get it, and they get that this national investment will help them lower energy costs and help them transition to a clean energy future. We must seize the opportunity that is before us. And the success of this federal law and how it helps Rhode Island depends on you. I look forward to continuing our work together, and I thank you again for your outstanding leadership. Now I'll pass it over to Chris Currens, Commissioner of the Rhode Island Office of Energy Resources. And I look forward to hearing from our panelists and, of course, from all of you. And full disclosure, I will need to duck out early to meet with some other folks from the Federal Reserve, but my staff will remain in this forum and we continue to be at your service. Thank you.
Senator Reed, before we move on, if I can, just because of what you just said that you'd have to jump off, I just want to tell you how grateful we are at the League of Cities and Towns for all the assistance you've given to our municipal communities. And you've been a great champion for all of us. And we do plan on listening to what you have to say and what your team has to say today so that we can coordinate our activities so we can best utilize these funds. But thank you so much for your leadership and all you've done for municipalities your whole career. We're very grateful.
Thank you very, very much, Ernie. And I'm grateful for your leadership too.
Thank you, sir.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Ernie, for hosting and organizing this event along with the Senator Reed's team. Senator Reed, thank you for that introduction. Yeah, looking forward to discussing with the towns, and also very excited to have Noah back from Rewiring America. I know that we got a chance to meet Senator Reed roundtable a couple of weeks ago, or maybe a month or two ago now, on the federal IRA funding coming to Rhode Island, including the tax credits that became available in January. And there are a number of different funding sources that we are currently pursuing or will be rolling out in the second half of this year. So really looking forward to discussing this with the group today. So thank you for having the OER here today. I do know we also have Karen Bradbury and then Steve Chybowski from the OER team. Karen's heavily involved, as you guys, a lot of you know, in federal related matters, but is also pursuing every federal energy funding opportunity that Rhode Island can apply for. And Steve is deeply involved in a lot of the energy efficiency programs at the state level that will be leveraging with the federal dollars coming to Rhode Island over the next few years. So thank you for having us.
Well, thank you, Chris. And now I'd like to call upon Carolyn Burnt and Noah Goldman, who can give us incredibly detailed insights, advice, and assistance as we move forward to use the funds that are available. Carolyn, Noah, please take it away.
Well, thank you, Senator. It's a pleasure to be here. I do have some slides that we're going to share, but as we're pulling those up, for those that aren't familiar with the National League of Cities, we're the voice of America's cities, towns, and villages, representing more than 200 million people. We work with 49 state municipal leagues, and the Rhode Island League of Cities and Towns is a great partner to us. And NLC is a resource to an advocate for 19,000 cities, towns, and villages. And I always like to say that at least 50% of our membership is considered a small city with a population under 50,000. So I know, and let's go, Jen, up to the third slide here. Okay, great. So I know we're going to talk about the Inflation Reduction Act, but I just wanted to mention that there are really three major pieces of legislation that can support climate and clean energy at the local level. And this starts with the American Rescue Plan Act, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or BILL, bipartisan infrastructure law, and then the Inflation Reduction Act. And I just want to mention each of these quickly. So first, ARPA. Within the infrastructure expenditure category, under the state and local fiscal recovery funds, that can be used for necessary investments in water, sewer, and broadband. And this slide demonstrates the eligible uses on water and sewer. But I just want to show that the highlighted part here, that green infrastructure investments and projects that address the impacts of climate change or improve resilience to climate change, such as rain gardens, measures to conserve and reuse water, reduce the energy consumption of public water treatment facilities, were expressly allowed and even encouraged. And this is just within the infrastructure expenditure category. There are other ways that ARPA and the state and local fiscal recovery funds can be used on climate, namely anything that is going to protect America's most vulnerable populations who are at risk of climate change. We can go to the next slide. And if you haven't checked out the local government ARPA investment tracker, this is something that NLC is doing together with NACO and Brookings. Really gives a searchable database into how communities are using their ARPA funds. So I pulled 2 examples here of communities that are using ARPA funds to advance climate resilience. These cities are both undergoing tree canopy enhancements and other programs. We can go to the next slide. And then the bipartisan infrastructure law includes tremendous funding opportunities, obviously, for local governments around transportation, water, broadband, and energy. A quick overview of some of the climate change resilience funding really falls into 3 main categories. We've got strengthening infrastructure against extreme weather events, transportation, which is the #1 contributor to greenhouse gas emissions, and then investing in clean energy. And then we can go to the next slide. And then finally, the Inflation Reduction Act. These are some of the programs that are of interest to local governments in the Inflation Reduction Act. The funding opportunities really fall into 4 bucket areas: improving building stock, reducing emissions from transportation, similar under the bipartisan infrastructure law, reducing greenhouse gas emissions overall, and improving air quality, and improving natural resources and agriculture. And then here, just back 1 sec. And then the IRA also offers new and expanded tax credits for individuals and households to transform their energy use and consumption. And a key role for local governments here is making sure your residents know about those individual opportunities. But the IRA also includes tax credits for the private sector and for local governments for renewable energy investments and production. And then we can go to the next slide. Okay, so I wanted to just spend a little bit of time on this issue of direct pay. Under the Inflation Reduction Act, for the first time, local governments are positioned to take advantage of the many energy credits directly. The IRA includes a provision that provides non-taxable entities investing in and producing clean energy with a direct payment in lieu of tax credits. Under the IRA, the direct pay applies to states, cities and counties, tribes, and other tax-exempt entities, such as municipal water or power utilities and school districts. So for city leaders, direct pay is an option for funding city-owned clean energy projects that will make projects more affordable for local governments and level the playing field between the local governments and the private sector, which has traditionally benefited from these tax credits. And the tax credits are available for a variety of both production of and investment in clean energy. So it's important to note that there are specific requirements around prevailing wage and apprenticeship that local governments will have to meet, and extra considerations that will boost the value of the direct payment, such as domestic content, projects that are located in low-income communities, and more. We don't know specifically how this will work yet, but it's expected that Treasury/IRS will release the guidance document soon, perhaps in the coming days or weeks. And then the tax forms will be released sometime after that, potentially later this year or early next year. So some of the guidance is already out from the IRS around this energy communities bonus credit, domestic content, and low-income communities. But do be on the lookout from NLC for more resources when this information becomes available. And we can go to the next slide. And this is just a list of the specific production and investment tax credits that fall under the direct pay provision. And I mentioned also some of these additional considerations that would help local governments maximize their credits. So prevailing wage and apprenticeships, this is not required, but projects that do not satisfy the prevailing wage and apprenticeship requirements will only be eligible for 20% of the tax credits for which they would otherwise qualify, meaning you'd forego 80% of that benefit. And then there are other bonus credits around the domestic content, energy communities, and low-income communities that can boost your credit for investment or production up to 10% or up to 20% in that low income communities category. Those are links to the guidance documents from the Treasury, and I'm happy to have Jennifer share these slides afterwards, because I know there were a few other links in this deck. And then finally, one more slide. Oh, two more slides, I think. We can go to the next one. So the climate and clean energy provisions in the IRA will incentivize a large shift towards clean energy and reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Here are a few examples of municipal water utilities that are undertaking clean energy projects that are likely eligible as tax-exempt entities to take advantage of the direct pay option. So these examples here, sorry, I think just back one slide. There we go. Basically fall into two categories. So projects that are related to combined heat and power would be eligible under the energy investment tax credit, and solar projects would be eligible under the renewable energy production tax credit and the investment tax credit. I've also linked here to two blogs that further explain the direct pay and provide additional examples that are likely going to be eligible. And then last slide here. Just some next steps, and to summarize, really talk to your state agency early and often to understand the process, the timelines, the programs. This includes your state Department of Energy, water, transportation, broadband, hazard mitigation. Many programs, particularly under the bipartisan infrastructure law, will flow through the states. Then there may be specific state pass-through requirements. Really encourage you all to work across jurisdictions and within the region to maximize funding and benefits to your communities. Many programs encourage or specifically require a regional approach or coordination. But really also think about what are your infrastructure needs in your projects, and then what federal funding programs best match those needs. How can you braid or stack federal funding or leverage other dollars? I know this is probably the biggest challenge that local officials are grappling with as you're getting started. And you also want to think about equity and resilience, which are two overarching themes from the bipartisan infrastructure law. These are going to be really important to describe in the narrative of your application and in your project scope. And then finally, use your state municipal league and National League of Cities and your congressional offices as a resource. And I think that's all for me. I'm happy to stop there and take any questions at the end. Thank you.
Oops, thank you. And Noah, are you you're ready to go?
Yes.
Before we do that, Carolyn, I just want to say thank you to you. That was an excellent presentation. And thank you for the offer of having the slides sent to us as well so we could distribute them. And welcome, Noah.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's great to be here. I will pull up my slides right now. Can you see these?
Yep.
Great. Okay. My name is Noah Goldman. I'm a policy associate at Rewiring America. Rewiring America is a national energy policy nonprofit that's working towards electrifying our economy. And we've had the great privilege to work closely with the folks in Rhode Island, Senator Reid and Commissioner Kearns and the Rhode Island Energy Office over the past few months, and hopefully into the coming years, to maximize the IRA and the other infrastructure investments in Rhode Island. So I think Carolyn provided an excellent overview of the specific incentives. Thank you, Carolyn. And so I'll use this opportunity to zoom out a little bit, talk about electrification broadly, talk about some of the consumer-facing incentives, which are sort of the other half of the IRA, and then talk about how the community-facing incentives, those supply-side incentives, and the demand-side residential-facing incentives sort of work together. And then, being mindful of the time, if we're rewiring is always happy to continue these conversations offline, and I'm happy to connect folks to our state and local team. But I'll start just by, sharing that this is a really positive vision. I think for so long, climate action has been defined by sacrifice and by a lot of personal responsibility. Which is the personal responsibility part is still true, but I think we have an opportunity, especially with the recent federal investments, to reframe this as a really positive vision grounded in abundance, grounded in the American dream, where we can maintain all that we have and just improve on all of those technologies that we're already using. So we're not asking folks to give up anything. We're just asking for the opportunity to deliver better technology, lower utility bills, fewer emissions, more local jobs. And I think that this is a really positive story, and it's one that can bring people along. So it's economic renewal and it's community infrastructure, and that's a story that we can sell. It's a story about kids driving to school in electrified school buses that don't belch out asthma-inducing pollution. And it's a story about those same buses then powering community resilience centers like schools or hospitals or nursing homes when the power goes out. And it's a story about saying goodbye to the volatility of fossil fuel commodity markets and having extra spending money to reinvest in communities. And it's a story about community renewal, as Carolyn mentioned, as direct pay and the tax credits enable community ownership and public ownership, and that can really keep dollars and keep economic potential within our communities. So this is a really exciting time, I think, and it sort of falls to us to maximize all of this potential and to realize this potential by actually leveraging these incentives. So that's sort of a high level a vision for where we're headed, but I know that it's also important to ground us in the actual climate reality, which is what brings so many of us here today. So we know that almost 90% of US emissions come from energy usage. So the rest might come from agriculture and refrigerants, but the vast majority of the climate problem is an energy problem. That brings with it some good news and some bad news. The good news is that we already know how to produce clean electricity, right? We can produce solar power. That's the cheapest energy source on the face of the earth. We can produce offshore wind and onshore wind. So that all exists, that's there, and it's happening. So the US electricity grid is getting cleaner every year. It's getting cheaper every year. That's great. The bad news and sort of where the opportunity lands is that a lot of the emissions, the energy emissions, don't come from the power grid itself. They come from our homes and our buildings and our vehicles. And a lot of that is direct fossil fuel combustion. So no matter how much we decarbonize the electrical grid, if we're burning fossil fuels directly in our homes and buildings and vehicles, then we're not going to be able to zero out our carbon emissions. So that's sort of the problem and opportunity, and the solution is that we can electrify everything. So if we do that, if we pursue clean electricity and electrify buildings and vehicles, that can reduce 80% of our energy related emissions. So in total, that's like 2/3 to 3/4 of the climate problem solved right there. And the good thing is that all of this technology exists. As I mentioned, the solar and the wind, that exists, the battery storage exists. And then on the demand side, the electric vehicles, the heat pump water heaters, induction stoves, this technology is all there. So we don't have to wait for a silver bullet sort of techno utopian solution on the horizon. We can pursue the solutions right now. And this is happening right now. So in 2022, heat pumps outsold gas furnaces significantly for the first time ever. This is really exciting. It's a great development, but still the rate of adoption needs to increase a lot. And there are still barriers. There are cost barriers. There's low market penetration in some parts of the country. There's skepticism from contractors and consumers. So we still have our work cut out for us. But this is where the Inflation Reduction Act and the other incentives that Carolyn walked through come in. So for the first time ever, households and communities have what we like to call an electric bank account, this stack of money with their name on it to electrify, to replace their machines, not all at once, but when they die, when they need to be replaced with efficient electric alternatives. But this will only work if people know about them. The tax credits especially depend on uptake, and so the more they're utilized, the bigger investment that represents in our communities. And so I'll walk through some of the individual sort of consumer-facing incentives in the IRA quickly. In the interest of time, I won't dive too deep into all of these, but this is what some of the individual incentives look like. So there are tax credits and there are rebates to electrify basically all of our lives, our homes and vehicles. And a few that I'll just point out, that there's a $2,000 tax credit for heat pumps and heat pump water heaters. The old tax credit was $300. So that's $300 to now $2,000 for a heat pump water heater. And that can mean the difference between replacing a gas furnace with a heat pump and locking in lower energy bills for the next 2 decades, or buying another gas furnace and locking in high energy bills and lots of carbon pollution for the next 2 decades. The $4,000 tax credit for used EVs, I think, is really exciting. Most cars are not new at point of sale. So this is for the first time ever, households that aren't buying a new car but are interested in buying a used EV will be able to get $4,000 off the sticker price. And then the rebates, which aren't available now but will be available in the coming months and years, are I think especially exciting for low-income households. And I know that Commissioner Kearns is really excited about this and rolling these rebates out in Rhode Island soon. We're really excited about this too, because that $14,000 rebate up to 100% of costs can really be the difference between a project that pencils and a project that doesn't. And it also includes incentives for the infrastructure that sort of enables the heat pumps and the induction stoves. So it includes incentives like panels and like updated electrical wiring, which is sort of not quite as sexy, but really important. And again, these incentives will only work if people know about them and they have the information to utilize them. I went back and checked the Congressional Budget Office score for the value of these incentives over the next 10 years. And the CBO says that these incentives in total represent a $52 billion investment in our communities. But the cool thing is that since the tax credits are unlimited, uncapped, right? They just depend on uptake. If there is high uptake, that number can easily be doubled, tripled, quadrupled. So it represents a really high potential investment if we're actually doing this work on the ground. So Rewiring America has sort of heard that call and started to build the tools that will enable households to electrify. So we started with an IRA savings calculator. Your eyes might have been glazing over as you just heard me talk about the incentives themselves, but I think that once you sort of start to see based on your household and your income and location, which is what the calculator asks for, once you start to see the actual incentives that are available to you, this can start to feel very real and very exciting. And so we released this calculator last September, and over 500,000, 500,000 Americans have calculated their savings using this calculator. So there's a ton of interest. And what's really exciting in the coming months is that we're going to partner with Rhode Island, with the State Energy Office to customize our calculator with Rhode Island specific incentives. This is the first time we're doing it anywhere in the country. Commissioner Kearns gave us a great pitch and we decided to start with Rhode Island. And so I think this is going to be sort of a one-stop shop for consumers, not only to access their IRA incentives, but also their state and local and utility incentives. And that's really exciting because that'll start to unlock even more savings and even more potential from these electrification opportunities. And then we're also going to release a customizable electrification planning tool. This is something that was sort of flowed out of the calculator itself because we started to get hundreds of emails from interested folks who had calculated their savings and we're just asking, what's next? How do I actually do this? How do I take these potential savings and actualize them and realize them? And so we're building a tool that will help households electrify based on their house, their appliances, their priorities, and sort of take this from from 20,000 feet down to the individual households and down to actual work and down to the contractor connection and a connection to low cost financing. So I'm really excited about where this is headed. So that's the individual side of things. I think it can be tempting to sort of silo the individual incentives from the community and supply side incentives because they're tackling different sides of the problem, but it really is two sides of the same coin. And part of the way that we can connect them, as Carolyn mentioned, is with the IRA's direct pay incentives. Because direct pay one of the really cool things that it can do, I think, is that it can, quote unquote, close the loop in terms of the dollar flows running through our energy economy. The status quo, the fossil fuel economy that we have now, it's basically taking money out of our pockets, out of our communities, and sending it out of our communities. It's sending it to multinational oil majors. It's sending it to oil producers across the country, to petrostates in the Gulf and in Russia. And an electrified future will start to bend that curve back towards the United States, back towards home. The average distance from electricity generation to electricity consumption is just a few miles. So it's already keeping dollars within our communities, but direct pay can go even further and literally keep those money flows in local communities, within school districts, within local governments, within local municipal owned utilities. And that's a really exciting opportunity, because then local governments and schools will be able to not only bypass the oil and gas companies, but bypass the clean energy equity developers on Wall Street, and just take back that power to build projects that actually work for our communities, to decide what to do with the revenue that results from those projects. So I think this is a really exciting area to explore. Carolyn mentioned that the guidance for direct pay is coming soon. I actually heard that it might be released today, this afternoon. So that's something to look forward to. There are still a lot of open questions. This is a relatively new concept, but I think it's a space worth watching and exploring because of the potential that it can bring to our communities. And talking about that potential, the other part of Rewiring America, I've mostly been talking about the tools and sort of the story here, but we also do a lot of research about the dollars and cents potential of what electrification looks like. And this is something that I shared the last time I spoke in Rhode Island. But out of 401 metro communities across the US that we analyzed, Rhode Island, the Providence-Warwick metro area, ranks in the 97th percentile for bill savings from electrification and the 96th percentile for emission savings. So across the whole country, the story here is one of the strongest, in part because of the high concentration of delivered fuels, which are so expensive and so carbon intensive. So the story is good. The economic potential is really strong. And I'll just give a pitch in the last minute for a coalition that we run, the Local Government Leaders for Electrification. This is our chance to continue to support you in the work you're doing and continue to sort of feed our tools and our resources, just like we're doing with the State Energy Office in Rhode Island, to you guys first, because we want these tools to go to the folks who will use them and who will put them out into the world, so we can iterate on them and continue to make sure that they're maximally helpful for actually doing this work on the ground. And the coalition also gives interested stakeholders, mayors, legislators, county executives, and their staff the chance to learn from one another and to be connected to the other folks in our network, which include the federal government, but also CEOs and the private sector and private sector financing, to really bring all of that together. So just to wrap this up, electrifying everything, it's a strong case, but there's still a lot of work to do. So a few things that I'd leave you to think about: be that government leader, model this action, be a pilot for your peers and for the rest of Rhode Island, and talk about these incentives, because as I said, none of this will work if people don't know. And poll after poll comes out showing that people don't know what's in the Inflation Reduction Act. And so we're trying to spread that word, and you can help us do that. And then explore these direct pay incentives to sort of marry the demand side, consumer facing incentives with the supply side, community facing incentives, and really unlock the potential that lies here. So with that, here's my email. Please feel free to reach out. We have a very dedicated and hardworking state and local team, and a team that's working with communities that are trying to do this work. So I'd be really happy to connect you with them and to continue this conversation.
Noah, thank you so much for your presentation, and thank you for your slide on the call to action for things for us to do, because a lot of times you hear a presentation, you don't know exactly what to do with that information. So I really appreciate your call to action. And by the way, I quickly clicked on your QR code to see how much I could get in tax savings for doing these. So thank you, Noah.
Great. Thank you very much.
I love
Any
it.
questions from the group?
Yeah, for questions. Sorry, go ahead.
No, this is just a general comment. Carolyn, thank you so much for that PowerPoint overview. If we could definitely get a copy of that, it's always a good refresher for what's available. And Noah, thank you for your overview, and certainly looking forward to developing that federal/Rhode Island calculator with you guys over the next few months. Ernie, just while it's in my brain as Carolyn was talking, I know that a lot of municipalities have pursued both renewable projects and energy efficiency investments over the last decade, whether that's some like on-site renewables or virtual net metered solar, where it's not on the town property, but it's linked to electricity accounts. One thing just to throw out maybe at some point this summer or fall is maybe we meet with all the towns and say, okay, what have you all done respectfully within your respective towns and cities with the state energy programs, the federal dollars from the ERA stimulus time period? What haven't you done that we maybe can leverage with the IRA funding in terms of private-public partnerships? Because a lot of these projects are done either by energy efficiency contractors or private solar companies. So we're certainly happy to engage with you guys, and whatever we can offer as technical assistance. We just most recently were providing technical assistance with the town of Westerly. They put out an RFP for solar on their landfill. So we're happy to help Ernie at some point this summer, fall, to try to fully maximize these federal incentives at the local level.
Chris, I think that's a great idea. And I made a note. Let's make sure we put that together, because I think it's wonderful to do that. Thank you for your leadership and a great idea.
That's great. Let's open it up for questions from the communities. You feel free to either type something in the chat, or you can raise your hand, or just, show us your face, take yourself off mute. Any questions for Noah, Carolyn, Commissioner Kearns, the Senator's office?
As people are maybe thinking of questions, I do have a couple other just municipal related updates just to pass along. One is, as part of the IRA, we are going to be receiving what's known as Energy Efficiency Conservation Block Grant funding. Some of you may remember that from the ERA stimulus period from 2009, 2011 time period. We do know that the Federal Department of Energy is sending just over $1 million to 10 municipalities directly for potential energy efficiency measures. Those 10 towns are Coventry, Cranston, Cumberland, East Providence, North Providence, Pawtucket, Providence, South Kingstown, Warwick, and Woonsocket. I know Karen Bradbury from the OER team has been engaging with a number of municipalities just to verify that you've been notified about those funding sources that are coming directly. And then separately, there's $1.6 million coming to the OER that we'll have to work on this summer, fall, to allocate to the other 29 municipalities. We're also looking at trying to leverage some state level funding to maximize the federal dollars with all of you. So further details will come, but I know Karen will be in touch, and certainly will be hitting the road this summer, this fall, not only on that funding, but the funding sources that are going to be available to households, just to start to gear up, because a lot of this funding we are waiting to come to Rhode Island, but we expect it later on this year, and really the next few years is when that money is really going to hit the streets with households, businesses, and certainly municipalities where they can do energy improvements.
Great. That's
Chris,
awesome.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I was going to ask you about that. But I think this is a great opportunity for communities that receive the funding directly because they meet that population threshold, or are going to get it from the state, to really work together and come up with projects that can have kind of a regional benefit. Because everyone's kind of coming to the table with a little bit of seed money, but it's not probably enough to like do a whole project. Because it's a really small pot, but it's really important, and it can get some good things moving in communities, but especially if you're able to work across jurisdictions or regionally, or piggyback on what the state is going to use its money for, then you'll really see those benefits in communities.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's not a large chunk of money, which is why we're starting to discuss internally how we maybe leverage those dollars with state dollars. Again, Karen's been leading that and just trying to think ahead in terms of the communication plan and stuff like that. Karen, I know that you're muted right now, but if there's anything that I've missed that you want to add, feel free to jump in. The other things just to highlight again is the home electrification program. Our office is going to be receiving just under $64 million that will be made available to households. That goes back to what Noah was presenting in terms of what will be available to a household. I would encourage you all to use the calculator as Ernie did during Noah's presentation. It's pretty cool. You just simply type in your zip code, your income level, your tax filing status. I did it for my parents' house in Bradford within Westerly. And, you know, a lot of times when you hear about these federal incentives, a lot of it's tax credits and not rebates. And when I did it for my parents' household, it was roughly a 50-50 split between tax credits that they could leverage when they do their tax returns the following year, and then direct rebate money. So it's a significant opportunity for all households to take advantage of. So certainly we'll be open to getting out within the municipalities. No, I'm sorry, I'm already volunteering yet at some point to come back to Rhode Island to meet with some of the town and city councils to maybe explain these programs for their constituents. So this is significant. This is the largest ever federal funding source infusion that's ever come to Rhode Island over the last certainly 20 to 30 years. So we're definitely looking forward to working with Ernie and the league on that front. The other thing to flag is, as some of you know, we have a just roughly $23 million national electric vehicle initiative. We have an RFP that we put out for additional charging station along the 95 corridor. So we have to install some additional charging stations in Warwick off of Route 117, I believe, at the Park and Ride. And then also just off of what was previously exit 1. I'm still learning the new exit numbers off of 95, off of previously exit 1. In the town of Hopkinton at that Park and Ride, we'll be installing some additional charging stations to meet our federal requirements. And then our hope is that we'll have roughly 19-20 million plus to work with for the phase 2 NEVI plan. And that will allow us to award funding to both private and public 24/7 parking lots, including, you know, gas stations, grocery stores, town halls, you know, DPW properties. So we're going to be engaging and collecting feedback from stakeholders regarding that program phase. Sometime, Karen, correct me if I'm wrong, probably look at us starting that sometime maybe in mid-July for like a 60 to 90 day kind of public comment period process to get feedback. So there's a lot of funding that we've received. We also just submitted a $15 million application for additional EV charging infrastructure funds to be targeted within certain municipalities that are identified as environmental energy justice identified communities. So a lot happening. So Ernie will definitely be probably bugging you and Jordan. Jordan, good to see you too. And Jennifer a lot this summer into the fall.
That's fabulous. I think we're we do these workshop Wednesdays every week, so we're excited to have you back anytime. And certainly Noah and Carolyn, once the guidance comes out, we'd be thrilled to have a little more details on how to navigate the systems to make this happen for municipalities. I will say that although we don't seem to have any questions, I will go on and share out all of the presentation slides, this recording, and your contact information for each of our presenters today. If you do think of questions from your individual communities that you'd like to ask offline. Oh, Carolyn, did you want to say something else? Yeah, please go ahead.
No, finish up your thought. I did want to flag one more program, but go ahead, you finish.
I was just going to thank everyone, so please go right ahead.
Oh, okay, great. So since we were talking about the energy efficiency and conservation block grant, it reminded me of something else where there can be some good regional and state coordination, and that's the climate pollution reduction grants. And so there's money for both planning and implementation. The planning funds are going to the state, and I was just looking this up. It is the Department of Environmental Management, and then also the Providence Regional MSA, Providence Warwick is getting some funds for planning, and that's going to be operated through the Southeast Regional Planning and Economic Development District. But I wanted to flag it for this audience because as the state is developing its plan, as the Providence MSA is developing its plan for reducing carbon pollution, it doesn't have to be within those bounds, particularly in the regional, the city one, it doesn't have to be within the bounds of the MSA. For example, any community can be encompassed into this plan for reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And the benefit of that is that if you're written into the plan, either the state plan or the regional plan, then those individual communities can apply to get an implementation grant, which will be open at the end of this year. So it's probably a little complicated. It may take a little bit more digging into, but I would just note that if you reach out to the state agency, again, those early conversations are important, and or the Southeast, whatever I said, that's operating the Providence planning process, and just say, my community is interested in being part of this greenhouse gas reduction planning effort, and figure out a way to be encompassed into the plan, and then you'll be able to maximize the dollars there.
Absolutely. And I think we do have a couple of other videos on our YouTube channel that go into greater detail about that program too, Carolyn. So I'll make sure to flag those for everyone as we share out this recap from this call. Great. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you to the Senator's office for helping us pull this together. Thank you to Noah and Carolyn and Commissioner Kearns. And on behalf of the Rhode Island League of Cities and Towns and Ernie, our wonderful executive director, I appreciate everybody's attendance here today, and look for a follow-up email from me. And you can always find out what's up with our Workshop Wednesdays on our website. So look out for what's next. All right. Thanks, folks. Have a great day.